We welcome people to visit mosques, and you can always, but then somebody goes in and they'll, cause a fight, and then, you have to deal with it. So in Mecca, this is supposed to be a place, even for Muslims, where we don't carry out any acts of violence, anything like that. So it's become a sanctuary only for Muslims. Yeah, sure. Come on, hard questions. Go ahead.
Okay, what are your thoughts with homophobia as the culture itself?
Sure. So homophobia, as I understand it to be a fear of homosexuality, I think it's a horrible thing. I don't know why you got to be scared of it, right? But in Islam, we do not approve of the homosexual lifestyle, as in many other faiths. For example, in Christianity, in the Bible, you have the same thing. You have a condemnation of Sodom and Gomorrah and men sleeping with men. But many priests have kind of come away from that. And to me, that's hypocritical, right? Either you believe in the Bible or you don't, right? If you don't be a Christian. And if you do, then you got to follow what it says, right? The same thing in Judaism or Hinduism and all these faiths, right? If you look at it, even if you take a step back from religion, like let's leave religion out of it. Let's look at it from a natural perspective, from a perspective of nature. If you, for example, today, all of humanity became heterosexual, right? Would we exist as a humanity? Hetero, come on, yes, all right? We would, right? You would have procreation, you would have children, and that's one of the core responsibilities of any species, whether it's animal or human, to carry on. If all of humanity went homosexual, everybody, right? There would be no more humanity. So, the natural method is a heterosexual lifestyle. That's what we believe. Now, do some people have homosexual inclination? Sure they do, right? But is it okay in Islam to act upon them? No.
So if, I don't know if this is disrespectful.
Go for it. No, there's no disrespect. Go for it.
Who has carried that culture and
Right?
they feel like they are or whatever,
Right.
they're not considered.
So like I said, having those feelings is fine. It's part of somebody's personality.
But it wouldn't be right to like
Act upon it.
Yeah.
So in Islam, we think of it as the same as bestiality. Right? Somebody, again, people are attracted to certain animals, right? Go to Alabama. Anyway, so point being, if you have that, you're not sinful for having a feeling, but if you carry that out, most people would find that to be unacceptable. And it's hypocritical in society today that if somebody disagrees with the homosexual lifestyle, you're called homophobic. Why? I'm not scared of homosexuals. I just don't agree with that lifestyle. And that's my right to have my opinion. As I don't think it's okay to have intercourse with animals or walls or pumpkins or whatever else, right? So and if you're going to say it's okay to be, whatever you want to be, then why is it not okay to have a relationship with a chicken or a goat, right? I mean, everybody has their own idea of what's okay and what's not. But in Islam, we don't. We leave it to the religious texts. Go ahead.
Kind of building off of that a little bit. Do you guys, I don't know if you would call it exiling them?
Exile? Put them on a boat to like a little island, a little gay island.
Like if they are gay, can they actively practice in mosques?
In mosques, like inside the mosque? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. So, as I said, if somebody has certain feelings, we understand that and we're accepting of people having certain inclinations, but...
Strictly
Go ahead.
don't act upon it.
Yeah. So it's like I said, just think of it the same as somebody is attracted to dogs, right? We understand there are people. I mean, there are people who officially get married to dogs. Check Germany out, right? But we feel that that's not acceptable, right? So if you have those feelings, we understand. If you want to talk about it, we can talk about it. And if you act on it, like in America, if you're gay, we're not going to come and kick you out of any restaurants or something. That's not the way it works. But as a Muslim, it is not acceptable for a Muslim to act upon those feelings. Go ahead. Man, there are other subjects here. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
If you were anywhere in the Middle East
All right.
and you were acting upon it, what would they do with it?
I don't know. Give you their number? No, I'm just kidding. So Middle East, again, when you say Middle East is not a country.
I'm Lebanese, so
That's cool.
If, like, for example, if like an Islam in Lebanon was to act
And Islam? A Muslim. Come on, you're Lebanese.
upon it in Lebanon, what would they, like, what's
Nothing. Lebanon's not an Islamic country. Right? So, as you know, Lebanon has a big Christian population, it has a big Shia population, it has Sunni population, it's a mixed country. The Middle East is not one country, as you well know, but just to clarify to everybody else, and any country in the Middle East would not be a single representation of Islam to begin with. So for example, in the Middle East you have Israel right now, right, which is a majority not Muslim country. It's ruled by Jewish law. So it's very hard to say what you would do in the Middle East. So in, like, let's say for example, if you said in Israel, then it is an illegal practice according to Jewish law, right? I don't know what the punishment, how they carry it out, but I do know, since I've been there, that it is illegal to be openly in a homosexual relationship in Israel, right? Like that in Saudi Arabia, it's the same thing. Other countries are different. For example, I mean, in the Middle East, you could have Turkey, which is a lot more liberal with their laws. So each country there will deal with it in its own laws. I can answer from an Islamic perspective. From an Islamic perspective, if you have certain inclinations that you carry out in the privacy of your own home, the government does not have a say in that, right? If you are openly practicing such practices and inviting towards the corruption of society, then they are dealt with legally by laws, right? Sure. And I'll give you an example in the US, I mean, just so we don't put ourselves on a high horse. What if somebody's Mormon and wants to get 2 wives? Is it legal? No, it's not actually. You may go ahead and get one if you like, go to Utah, but it's illegal, right? You'll get arrested, there's fines for it, there's jail time possibly for it. Why? Because as a society we've decided that polygamy is not okay. So as a Muslim society they've decided that homosexuality is not okay, and it would be legally not possible for you to get married or practice outside. So you have to live by the laws of that land. Go ahead.
So what role do veils play for females in public?
Excellent, good question.
What do you think about the criticisms that say that they limit self-expression?
Excellent, that's a good question. So let me take that in two folds. First thing is, you go to Mesa College, and here you have women that we see here wearing the hijab here. Do you see it to restrict your life? No, right? Anybody forcing you? Your dad got a gun outside? He's like waiting, come out, we'll see you. How about you? You sure? What about, no, you're all good.
So he just started like to go to wear the hijab.
Excellent.
She knows.
What's your name? Huh?
Rosita.
Rosita? Rosita, do you find that hijab restricts you from life? You can't go outside anymore? You just cry in a corner at home? Right? So no, the point that I'm making is that the hijab, first thing, is not something forced upon women. It's a choice. It is a part of Islam. I'm not saying that a Muslim woman doesn't have to wear it. She does have to wear it. But it's her choice. In the Jewish faith, for example, you also have the concept of hijab, different names, but it is something that has to do with marriage, that they wear after marriage. Has to do with authority of the husband. But in Islam, you don't have that. It's in the Bible as well, right? It wasn't the topic today, but we can discuss that. About, if a woman prays or prophesies without her head covered, then her head should be sworn, which should be shaved. And if she doesn't want to, then let her be covered. In the Bible, New Testament, right? Many Christians do practice that, like the Amish, like Catholic nuns and others. Others don't. That's up to them. In Islam we have it, but the difference between Islam and Judaism and Christianity, as in the Bible it's shown as an authority of man over woman, in Islam it's not. In the Quran, the hijab has to do with to show the honor of a woman, to let her to be known as a pious, as chaste woman. So the hijab is a representation of modesty, and it's a choice of the woman. Are there families that may force their daughters? Maybe. Are there families that force their daughters to get married? Probably. In every culture across the world, right? But that's not Islam. You got to separate what may go on in certain countries and what Islam teaches. Islam teaches that the hijab is a religious practice regarding the modesty. And men have their own laws of dress. You didn't see me come here in Speedos and a marble bag, and trust me, you would have all left. So men have their own rules of clothing. Women have their own rules of clothing. And we live by them, a modest lifestyle. And I'll give you a further clarification on that, right? Are we going to be honest?
Well, I have a question about
Well, I was getting there, relax. I'm getting there, right? But I'm saying, in understanding hijab, in the conversation we're going to have, are we going to be honest? You sure? All right. All right, good. We'll see. All right, let's say you meet somebody, a female, at a after-school party at San Diego State. Forget, right? Right? Somebody knows state well, right? And you see her in a very short skirt and small tank top, right? Oh, yeah. See, he's honest, right? Now, honestly, what is the first thing that grabs your attention?
I mean, usually
Yeah?
the skin.
Honest? All right. So you're just going to be like, oh, she doesn't have blemishes on her hand, yay. Let's be, like I said, either we can be hypocritical about the conversation or be honest. If we're honest, every man in here is going to say, you know what, those physical features is where the attention goes. And that's where you begin your judgment. And that's why in Western society, if you look at commercials, if you look at how chewing gum is sold, it's sold through selling the woman's body. You see a lady in a bikini jumping up and down and spearmint gum. You're like, what does that have to do with that, right? You don't see, anyway, you know. Point being, that's how it's misused. The hijab takes away from that. Right? It takes it where now you have to pay attention to the personality of that person. You're not looking at their bra size, you're not trying to figure out about their six-pack. You are thinking about what they're saying and who they are as a person, and you're judging, you are endearing due to that. And that's the point of the hijab. Now, there are levels of hijab, right? And it is, for example, some who cover their face and hands, some that don't cover the face and hands, they cover the head and body, and that's all between Islamic tradition. But all of that put together doesn't restrict a woman from anything that she needs to do, right? For example, I was in Malaysia recently, and many people there, they wear the little, medical masks for apparently no reason, but they're very worried about germs, and they walk around with that. And that's no different than wearing a niqab. You can still be a doctor, you can still be an engineer, you can still be a pilot. There are women that wear the hijab, as our sisters here are wearing, that are in the Olympics. There are women that are in parliament, or Congress, I believe, right, today, that wear the hijab. So to think that it's something that restricts them, I don't believe so. And our Muslim sisters don't, and that's why they choose to wear it. It's a Western prejudice that views it that way. Like they see the hijab and they get into some weird fantasy about domination, and they look at it and then they think, oh, she's oppressed, let me go liberate her, and we're good, thanks a lot. So, what was your other question? Was that it?
No, that was.
All right, cool. Thank you. And please, no offense, so ask anything you like. Go ahead.
Along those tangents, you're dressed somewhat modestly.
Thank you.
And I think you're
Thank you.
very handsome.
All right. Please get that on recording. Go ahead.
So how come you're not covered?
So that's a good point. I mean, if you look at me and you look at the sister sitting here, I'm as covered or more as she is, right? Pretty much, right?
How come you don't wear a full covered burqa?
Because as...
Stopping me from having those thoughts.
Okay, so let's take it there. First thing is, we have to understand in honesty, right? Either we can be hypocritically dishonest or honest. If we're honest, the way men and women react to attraction is different. That's a reality, right? I'll explain. When you go, and again, I'm sorry, I'm going to be blunt and honest, so don't get offended. I'm not getting offended. I hope you guys don't either. If you go downtown, or if you go anywhere else, and you see the number of strip clubs, right? How many Chippendales do you have, and how many female stripping clubs do you have, right?
Unfortunately, it's not balanced.
It's not anywhere in the world, right? Right. But why is that? If you look at the ratio of rape in the world, right? And again, I'm not justifying any of this. I'm explaining something, right? The rape ratio of women raping men or men raping women, where's the ratios, right? No.
Also a lot unreported.
Many men are getting raped and not reporting it? Could be, I guess, right? right? Now, but if you honestly look at it, there is a difference, right? If you look at, for example, catcalling, or if you look at sexual harassment, the Me Too movement, how many men are being harassed in that way? And really great. But percentage-wise, where are we? Unbalanced. So human nature is where, unfortunately, men have less control than women do. Women are able to control their attractions better. And it's a strength for women. That's just a fact. We can deny it all day long, right? But it's reality, right? And you have to deal with reality. Is it okay for a man to judge a woman by her physical body instead of her mind? No. But is that a reality you have to deal with? Yes. Understand? When you go in for a part in a movie role, is it okay for that director to try to take advantage of a person because of their, whatever? No. But does that happen? Yes. Do we as a society in the West kind of push it under the rug? Yes. And that's the problem, because we don't want to deal with reality. We want to set up fiction. So, as a man, if I'm dressed like this, and I'm walking down the street, I've never been catcalled. If you do it, I'll be pretty happy about it. Go for it, right? I've never been pinched. I've never been brushed up against and fondled. It never happens. Why? Because fortunately, a strength that women have is that they have better control on it. But as a female, and I'm not going to ask here because I don't want to embarrass anybody, but when you walk down, College Avenue on Saturday night, I guarantee you if you're dressed a certain way, you're going to get catcalled, you're going to get, targeted, and that's a horrible thing. We're not saying it's okay, but you have to deal with that reality. So the level of hijab for a woman is more than that of a man. But we have our own rules. For example, and I'll give you one last example and we'll get off this topic. If I took off my nice thobe, took off my t-shirt, walked around bare-chested, would I be arrested? But if you did, same thing. So that means man and woman's body and its attraction is at different levels. The covering of woman is different from a man. And that's the same in hijab. But each has its own laws. More questions? He got that one, right? Go ahead. No offense here. Ask anything you like. Go ahead.
My name is Joha.
Joha, how are you?
I'm Muslim.
MashaAllah.
I have questions about hijab. In Muslim, hijab means something protection about female from unnecessary things. Like if she is my wife, she must be sexy for me, not for others. Let me give you for example. If you going to shopping center and there is two sorts of bananas with a peeled one and with a covered one, which one do you buy? Or which one do you prefer to buy? The covered one, right? The peeled one is like something contaminated, virus, everything, right? So the same thing, hijab is a protection for the females. So we do everywhere. We do the Islamic ideology. We follow the Sunnah. That's the meaning of hijab.
Thank you. Let's keep the questions from the audience and the answers from up here. Go ahead.
Really quick, can somebody from the Islamic religion marry somebody else that belongs to another religion?
Excellent question. Marriages between the faiths is possible, but there are rules and regulations about it, right? Because you have to understand, in Islam, we have a certain lifestyle. As I said, it's a way of life. And if you have a father, or for example, that's drunk and eating pork and going out and partying TJs, and then the mother is telling the child that you have to pray, it doesn't work, right? And if that father's religious values allow that, and there are religions that have nothing against getting drunk, right? Then it doesn't mix. You see what I'm saying?
But it's not impossible.
It's not impossible, but there are rules and regulations about it, right? Which is the Ahlul Kitab and Rijal and Nisa and things like this. But within the sets of rules, it's possible. Possibilities. More questions, please.
So I want to shift the conversation
conversation a little bit back to Islamophobia. I'm
Thank you.
curious about what's happening here in San Diego in terms of our, mosques being targeted, anti-Islamophobia bullying campaigns being protested, those sorts of things. So what are you seeing here locally?
So are mosques being protested or targeted? Yes. We have a mosque that was burnt down or burnt arson in Escondido after New Zealand, and the arsonist had shown that he had done this action in support of what happened in New Zealand. There are other mosques that have been burnt in the past, that have been attacked. There are Muslims in San Diego that have been physically attacked, women in hijab that have been attacked. So yes, that goes on. There are hate crimes. The Muslim community is trying to combat that, mostly by functions like this, kind of open their doors. The mosques in San Diego are all open to everybody. I particularly pray at a mosque off of 70th Street called Ribat, and we're open to anybody. You guys want to come, we're welcome. Have some food, have some tea on us. Come chillax with us, get to know us. And that's been our response, trying to open the doors and build bridges. At the same time, there are different mosques working with different law enforcement elements, but is that really where it should be? No, right? Bullying against Muslims, unfortunately, is tolerated a lot. If you go to schools and you see a lady in hijab or a Muslim man in beard, there is a lot of name calling that, for example, if you did the same kind of name calling against somebody who's Jewish or African American, it wouldn't be accepted, but it is against Muslims. And that has to do with kind of the White House and the national debate that's been going on, right? There are professors like yourself and people like the students that are building these bridges to kind of counteract that, but from a government level, we're not seeing it. Go ahead. Go ahead.
You mentioned something in your presentation about how all these prophets were Muslim.
Yes.
I'm kind of confused because
Sure.
I always thought they were Jewish. So
Excellent. Good question. So let's go back to definitions, right? What is a Muslim? Right? We mentioned that a Muslim is somebody who surrenders themselves to their Creator, who follows the rulings that their Creator has set for them, right? So in the definition of that word, if you look at Adam, if you look at Moses, if you look at Abraham, they were people who followed their Lord, their Creator, right? Which we would call Allah. So by definition, they were Muslims, right? That's our definition. Now, as a race, they could be of Hebrew or Jewish heritage. They could be of other heritage, as other prophets like Solomon and others, right? But as a religious practice, what they did is what we call being Muslim, so they were Muslims, right? Judaism is a religion, but it's also a race. Like when he said they were Jewish, if there's a prophet, for example, who was African, who was not of the Hebrew race, according to strict definition, then he wouldn't be a Jew because it's a race as well, right? But according to Islamic tradition, if he followed the traditions of God and the ordainments of God and submitted himself, he would be a Muslim, no matter what time period or geographical location or practices of that time were there. So we believe all the prophets were Muslim. More questions? Come on. Go ahead.
Okay, so there's this stereotype that I've heard that Muslims are allowed to have up to 5 wives or something.
Totally wrong. It's 4. Alright. So in Islam, polygamy is allowed in certain situations. Right? So in the Quran, there is permissibility to have multiple wives, but in the end of the verse, Allah tells us that you have to be equal, exactly fair with each one, and you won't be able to, so it's better you just stick to the regular one, right? So Islam is a religion for all times and all places, right? So it's not like it's only in the Middle East or only in Africa or only for a particular race of people. So certain circumstances arise where that rule may be needed. And if we're being honest, for example, in Iraq right now, due to the bombings and killings and drones and war, there are many women, and you can Google this, who have been left with no ability to earn a living because the infrastructure of the country has fallen apart, and they have their husbands and their brothers and their fathers are dead, and they have children, and many of them are turning to professions that are not reputable, if you say, you know what I'm saying? They call it the oldest profession, right, whatever. And that's a horrible thing. You don't want to have to put somebody through that. So in certain situations, for example, if there is a woman who is in that need and the wife of the person is willing and she's willing and somebody takes a second wife out of certain necessity, and there are certain rules around that, there is a permissibility there up to 4. Right?
So you're allowed to marry, a woman is allowed to remarry even if she has children?
Yes.
If her husband is dead?
Or divorced, or moved on, or we have the concept of divorce in Islam, even though it's frowned upon. It's not something good, but there are certain times you just, it doesn't click. So unlike Catholicism, we do allow for that, and there is no problem with remarrying.
So women are not allowed to have 4 husbands?
So no, they're not, and there are reasons for that. For example, as I said, today, if a woman had multiple husbands, you could still know who the father is through DNA testing. But in the earlier times, how would you know? If a man had 4 wives, you still know who the mother is, you still know who the dad is. And I can't think of a situation where that would be needed. But as I mentioned, for example, in other societies where a woman is not protected, as they may be in our society here, able to get a job and earn a living, they may need to marry somebody, and if there's men are dead, and there's few men left, then that necessity may come up. Again, if it's not necessary, you don't have to, stick to. Polygamy is a very, very small percent of the Muslim world today. Anywhere in the world, and you go in Muslim countries, you will find 0.00001% who would actually practice it just because of society and the way it is, right? But there are practical benefits and times where it's needed, so that leeway is given, right? But when it's not needed, for example, a woman to get a second husband, then it's not permissible. Go ahead.
No, you got it.
Oh, come on. All right.
Well, so,
Go ahead.
just to bounce off of that.
Sure.
Because your response was actually, it was articulate.
Thank you.
But I think that.
Handsome and articulate.
If we had lived in an alternate universe where perhaps the firstborn child was the beneficiary of the mother's inheritance,
Okay.
then there is no contestation of whose child that is. If we
Okay.
lived in a society where everything comes from the mother,
Sure.
where property and inheritance and rights come from the mother,
Sure.
then you could be able to contest, well, was that my child? Well, I gave birth to that.
Right.
So this is saying like maybe some millennia ago, we made that decision to let the dudes be like, no, girl can't have multiple husbands, only dudes.
Gotcha.
That's all I have to say.
Sure. Let me just go off of that. In alternative universe, if that was the situation, then maybe the rules would be alternative, would be flipped. That is true. But dealing in the universe that we do live in and the society we live in, this is the way it is. As I said, Islam is something that's applicable at all times in all places that we live in. So if there are situations that arise that require different ruling, then the scholars of Islam have a process we call qiyas and fiqh, where we can derive rulings as applicable for that society.
But imagine, like, if everything that I own and everything that I have that is of value went to my first child, then technically I could have four husbands.
Go for it. But then again, in Islam, I don't know, the rules of inheritance aren't like that. I wasn't actually talking about inheritance, but rather lineage, right? So meaning, in Islam, your property doesn't go to your first child or your male children. Males have their inheritance, females have their inheritance, all children get their inheritance. But there is the issue of lineage, meaning, when you have a child, and again, not just in one segment or time period, but you do need to know who the father is. The bond that a father has with his son, or a mother has with her son, or her daughter, or his daughter, is different from even somebody who may be a close relative. So to know that identity is also of importance, not just inheritance, and also the necessity. What would be the necessity for such an action? For a man, even in Islam, it's not just like you go out and get as many wives as you like for any carnal desire, no consequence, right? There are rules and regulations, there are situations that would require that. So again, in looking at that, that's how rulings come. Right.
Well, I look at any religion, and we can see this a lot in Christianity, and it's the same thing. You guys closely related. Do you guys feel like there's interpretation of the Quran? Do you feel
Sure.
like certain mosques vary from it?
Sure. So Islam has some unique characteristics that I do not find, and again, I studied a lot of the world religions before I chose to be a Muslim. Islam has a structure of interpretation, right? So there is the Quran, and all Muslims have one Quran, unlike Christianity. If you've studied Christianity, the Catholic Bible has a different number of chapters than the Protestant Bible. They have, actually, I mean, it's not like different understandings, there's different books that are in the Catholic Bible that are not in the Protestant Bible. There are books that were divine originally that were not in the Bible that we have today, right? And then King James and his additions and subtractions and all of that. Islam doesn't have that. So there's one Quran across the world. If you go to Shiite, Sunni, whatever, you won't find the same Quran. You go to China, you go to Malaysia, you go to the US, you go to South America, Mecca, same Quran. Just one, 114 chapters, 30 sections, exact same Quran, right? So that's one unique feature which stops that kind of a misinterpretation. Secondly, we have what's called hadith, which are the sayings and actions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that were authentically recorded, meaning they were checked for authenticity, right? So when the Prophet explained a ruling, they would be checked to make sure that there are Hijab, which are the chain of narrators to the Prophet, the number, checking for their memory, checking for their moral character, which we don't have in Christianity. You don't have in Judaism, you don't have in Hinduism, which is called Mustalah Hadith in Arabic, right? So that makes it that the actual message of Islam is well preserved. Where the problem gets to be is when the ignorant step in and start giving rulings without knowledge, right? So when you have people political, let's say, I'll give you an example. Rush Limbaugh, he's on the radio talking about what Islam is. What qualifications does he have to talk about what Islam is? Has he ever studied Islam? Has he know usul al-fiqh, tafsir? No, he's just a guy on the radio that decides to say what Islam is. At the same time, you have Osama bin Laden, or had, giving fatwa. Well, he can't give a fatwa. He's not a qualified mufti. Where did he study? Which scholars accredited him with the ability to give fatwa. But because he was a political figure and a rich Saudi, I guess, that he was giving fatwa. So this is the problem. When the Muslim world was colonized by the Europeans, and they were, every bit of it almost, then the first thing they did in Africa is they killed the scholars. Look about Umar al-Mukhtar and what happened in Libya with the Italians, and what happened with the British in parts of Africa. So it made a vacuum. And when those countries liberated from the European powers, from the British and the Italians, the French and the Portuguese, it left that vacuum, and from that vacuum came ignorance. And that's why you have Daesh and you have all these terrorist groups, because they're not based on scholarly work. They're based on political motives, right? And Fox News and all of them, they give voice to that. They don't give voice to the Islamic scholars who are well versed, that are explaining that those suicide bombings are not acceptable in Islam. So this is the problem of interpretation. Islam in itself is able to preserve its tradition well. But certain mosques are off because they don't have knowledge. So they kind of go where they want to go with. But if you sit down and bring the proof, Islam has a clear way. Go ahead.
Okay, so I lived in Bahrain for a couple of years.
You live where?
I lived in Bahrain, yeah.
Gotcha.
And so the Shia and the Sunni divide, it's very big there.
Right.
And there's a lot of protests and
Right.
things that go on out there. But they also have a king.
Right.
And so I've always been very curious how they, since, it's all, they're all Muslim, I was always kind of wondering why that divide was so big
Sure.
there. Because, you have, that's the first place I ever saw Rolls Royce like that.
Oh,
and
yeah. They got
then
money.
people without running water,
Right.
blocks apart.
So if you want to see that, you can go to LA as well.
Well,
Go to Beverly Hills and go to Compton. I got you.
Yeah,
Right.
they're
No.
living.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing to understand is there is the religion, and then there are political situations in the world, right? For example, in Ireland, you had a long, ongoing, continuous battle between Catholics and Protestants. and technically they're both Christian, but the IRA and they went at it, blew up, killed, all that kind of stuff. You find the same thing in South Sudan between Christians right now. They're killing different. So those are political situations. In Bahrain, you have a king who's Sunni, and you have a majority population that's Shia. So you have a political divide. But as a religion, there is no Shia-Sunni division. In reality, we have one religion. Why? We have one Quran, we have one prophet, we have one methodology in that. But sometimes politics gets into play. Iran, which is the center of Shia thought today, was not Shia until the Safavids. And the Safavids, why they went Shia historically, is because they had the Ottomans on one side and they had the Mughal on the other side, who were both Sunni. And the Safavids were Sunni. And they said, you know what, our soldiers won't fight for us, so let's change this up. And the amount of influence that came from France for that can be known by if you go to somebody from Iran today and you want to say thank you, what do you say? Merci. Like French. You see? Lawrence of Arabia. You understand? European powers actually stirred this pot. They're the one that lit this fire.
Yeah.
I mean, until then, Shia and Sunni used to live whatever, and it was a political issue. To make it more of this ideological divide was something that benefited the colonial powers. And that history is playing out. Many of these conflicts, if you go to Kashmir, if you go to the problems in Iraq, it's not the problem of the people. It's because it's a political chess game being played in the Middle East.
Oh yeah, no, just seeing how the king was treating people and
Horrible,
the
right?
things
So
that like he
in
would
Islam,
do for people
in
practicing
Islam,
his own
we don't
religion.
have the concept of kingship,
Yeah.
right? So Islamically, we shouldn't even have a king. There should be a Khalifa who is elected by a shura or by a qualified body. So that's the Islamic method. But in Bahrain, you have a king, and his son will become king after him with no qualifications except that he was from a womb. Anyway, so that's not Islamic method, right? It may go on. Some Muslim countries have dictators, some have elected democratic presidents, some have kings. That's got nothing to do with Islam. That's their political. For example, in the West, in Europe, you have kings. In America, we have a dictator. I'm sorry, we have a president. Right? So that's a political issue. That's not a religious issue, right? And again, the divide between the rich and the poor, it's horrible in Dubai, in Bahrain. But it's not much different from the West. You can go up to certain places and they don't, in a block apart, you will see somebody living in a mansion with Bentleys, and then you'll see somebody who's living in the ghetto and cockroaches and not having cereal. So that's a whole different issue.
Yeah, I guess I was just kind of wondering what the big difference was when it's all falls under kind of the same thing.
Politics, rich trying to stay rich, keeping the poor poor. Same thing we see everywhere in the world. I mean, look at Russia. Yeah, if you go to Russia, you will find in Moscow most extravagant stuff. Caviar, I mean, people, all that kind of stuff. And then you'll find people from Uzbekistan who are laborers that are just broke, that are doing all the work, right?
Yeah.
Same thing here. You see somebody, billionaire sitting there, gambling up in Vegas, and then you'll see the poor lady from El Salvador cleaning all the rooms for $2 an hour and then being called an illegal immigrant or whatever, right? So you see all those things, but that's all politics. Nothing to do with religion itself.
Okay.
How do you like that, man? Nice.
How did I like it? It's really hot.
Yeah.
Ramadan is rough.
At least you're on an island, you got the wind. I mean, try being in Saudi, man.
Yeah, I mean, my flat overlooked the ocean pretty well.
That's cool.
I mean, it was, honestly,
But Bahrain's not exactly an Islamic country. You got casinos, you got...
oh, yeah, no, it was very confusing when I got
Yeah.
out there because it does operate very differently than, what you've been led to believe. So,
I mean, all the Saudis pretty much come across that bridge.
Thursday night, it's on.
Yeah, it's all good.
It's crazy and boring.
Sunday, everybody's back trying to get over
It's
the headaches.
my best time I've ever had, the best experience I ever got in life. They taught me and showed me a lot that
Good.
was very different than what I was.
And that's why it's always good to travel. You go out to different
Traveling is
places,
very important.
get to know different people. More questions? This is your opportunity. Ask them. No offense here. And once, and twice. So, thank you very much. Again, if you continue to have questions, please feel free to reach out. And we are open and